What's wrong with you all?
Solomon Ingram, 68, 3 months behind on rent, stood in his dilapidated garage at 11 p.m. as 12 soaking wet bikers lurched through the worst storm East Texas had seen this year. The woman in front took off her helmet. White woman, expensive leather, hands trembling.
2 bikes are dead. One of us could barely stand. Every shop to Houston is closed.
Solomon looked at them. 12 strangers, soaked, desperate. Eviction notice in his pocket. 8 days left. He grabbed his toolbox, pushed the door wide open.
Come in, everyone.
Wait, we're at Cat, you're in 31st? You're really helping us? Right now?
Ma'am, that's what I always do.
A man with nothing gave it all to strangers. What appeared at his shop 3 weeks later changed his life forever. But to understand why that night mattered, you have to understand what Solomon Ingram had already survived. Solomon's shop sat on Route 31, just outside Beaumont, a small town in East Texas where people left faster than they arrived. The sign out front read Ingram's Auto and Cycle Repair, hand-painted, faded. The R in repair fell off 2 winters ago. Solomon never fixed it. Too busy fixing everyone else's problems. The shop had 2 bays. One door didn't open anymore. Solomon turned it into a tool wall. The other stuck halfway. You had to kick the bottom and pull. 40 years of the same kick, the same pull. Inside, it smelled the way it always did. Engine oil, WD-40, coffee on the burner since dawn. Most people would call it a mess. Solomon called it home. And it almost was. He opened this shop in 1992 with his wife, Nora. They built it together. Solomon laid the concrete. Nora painted the sign. Navy blue letters on white. Because blue is honest, she said. He never questioned it. Nora had a way of making a room warmer just by walking into it. She kept the books, handled the customers, remembered every name, every car, every birthday. People didn't come to Ingram's just for repairs. They came because Nora made them feel like family. She passed 8 years ago. Cancer. The kind that doesn't give you enough time to say everything you need to say. Her reading glasses still hung on a hook by the register. Sometimes Solomon would whisper something to them, just a few words, like she was still there, like she could still hear him. Maybe she could. Then there was Terry. Terrence Terry Ingram, Solomon's only son, his apprentice, the one who was supposed to take over the shop. Terry loved motorcycles more than anything. He could take apart an engine blindfolded and put it back together faster than most could read the manual. He had Solomon's hands, Nora's smile, plans to ride across the country one day, coast to coast. He never made that ride. Terry got sick at 28, gone by 29. The kind of illness that takes the young ones first and never explains why. After Terry, something in Solomon went quiet. Not broken, just quiet. He stopped humming, stopped waving at cars, stopped eating lunch unless Earl next door brought it over and put it in front of him. But he never stopped working. Every morning he unlocked that door. Every night he locked it again. The shop was the last thing he and Nora built together. The last place Terry's hands touched a wrench. Closing it would be like burying them all over again. But the world didn't care about any of that. Big chain shops moved in. Digital diagnostics, coupons, waiting rooms with flat screens and free Wi-Fi. Solomon had a coffee pot from 1998 and a radio that picked up 2 stations. Customers disappeared. One by one, then all at once. Beaumont kept shrinking. Young people moved to Houston, Dallas, Austin. The ones who stayed didn't have money for repairs. They just let things break. Then came Hank Caldwell. Hank owned the building. He wasn't a bad man, but he was a landlord. And landlords have mortgages. Solomon was 3 months behind. Hank delivered the notice himself. Couldn't look Solomon in the eye. 30 days. That was 22 days ago. Solomon kept that notice folded in his shirt pocket. Every morning he took it out, read it, folded it back. A ritual. Like pressing on a bruise just to make sure it still hurts. 8 days left. But here's the thing about Solomon Ingram. He still opened the shop every single morning. Still waved at every car that passed, even the ones that never stopped. Still hummed gospel songs while he worked. Quiet ones. The kind his mother sang on Sunday mornings. And on the wall behind his workbench, he kept something most people didn't notice right away. Polaroids. Hundreds of them. Every car he'd fixed in 30 years, photographed with the owner's name in black marker underneath. Families, truckers, teenagers with their first ride, old men with their last. The last Polaroid was from 4 months ago. The wall had space for more, but no one had come. His best friend Earl Gentry ran the barber shop next door. Earl brought lunch, told jokes, told Solomon to retire once a week. "Sol, you're 68. Your knees sound like popcorn. Hang it up." Solomon always gave the same answer. "Retire to what, Earl? An empty house and daytime television? No, thank you." But at night, when the shop was dark and the street was empty, Solomon sat on the bench out front, held that eviction notice in both hands. And his hands shook. Not from age, from fear. Fear of losing the last thing that proved he was still here, still useful, still needed. On the night the storm hit, Solomon was closing up late. He almost didn't come back to lock the door. What difference did it make? 8 days. But then he heard Nora's voice. Not really, not out loud, but in that space behind his ribs where she still lived. "A man who takes care of his tools takes care of his life, Solomon." He turned around, walked back, locked the door. And that's when the sky opened up. The storm wasn't the only thing that arrived that night. What Solomon didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the next few hours would set off a chain of events that would change everything. His shop, his name, his entire life. But that part comes later. Right now, it was just rain. Not regular rain. Not even close. Gulf Coast rain. The kind that doesn't fall. It attacks. Sheets of water slamming the pavement so hard it bounced back up. Wind bending the old oak trees sideways like they owed somebody money. The power flickered twice, then a third time. Solomon's radio crackled out a flash flood warning between bursts of static. The creek behind Route 31 was rising. If it hit the road, Solomon would be stuck here all night. He should leave. He knew that. Every logical bone in his body said, "Go home, get dry, come back in the morning." But Solomon didn't move. He stood in the doorway of his shop, watching the sky tear itself apart, when he heard them. Engines, Deep, throaty, the unmistakable rumble of V-twins cutting through the wind. Not one or two, a whole group, getting louder. Then headlights appeared through the wall of rain. One after another after another. 12 motorcycles, riding in tight formation, pulled into Solomon's muddy gravel lot and stopped. The lead rider dismounted first, pulled off a helmet, and shook out a head of silver hair plastered flat. A white woman, mid-50s, leather jacket dark with rain. She walked straight to Solomon's door with the kind of calm that only comes from someone who's handled worse. Her name was Catherine Eldridge. Everyone called her Cat. She didn't waste time. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you this late," she said. Water was running down her face. "We're a riding group, veterans and their families. We left Houston this morning, heading to a memorial ceremony in Memphis. The storm caught us on the open highway." She paused, took a breath. "Two of our bikes are dead. One of our riders, an older gentleman, he's been out in this cold too long. He can barely stand." Solomon looked past her into the lot. 12 bikes. 12 riders. Some still sitting on their seats, too exhausted to move. Others huddled together near the far wall, trying to block the wind. Rain hammered every single surface. The scene looked like something out of a disaster film. Then Solomon saw him, an older man, early 70s, sitting on the back of someone else's bike. A younger rider was holding an umbrella over him, but it barely helped. The old man's face was pale. His hands were shaking, not the nervous kind, the cold kind. His riding gloves were calfskin. His boots were custom-made. Details that didn't quite match the rest of the group. But Solomon didn't focus on that. He focused on the man's eyes. They were tired. Not just from the ride, from something deeper. Solomon recognized that kind of tired. He saw it in his own mirror every morning. He looked back at Kat. Then he looked behind him, at his shop, the leaking roof, the stuck door, the Polaroid wall with 4 months of empty space. The eviction notice in his pocket that said he had 8 days left on this earth in this building. Every reason in the world to say no. And then, somewhere deep, in that space behind his ribs, he heard Nora again. "That's not a stranger, Solomon. That's just someone you haven't helped yet." He didn't think about it. He didn't weigh the costs. He didn't calculate what he had left to give. He just stepped aside and pushed the door open as wide as it would go. "Come on in, all of you. Let's get out of this rain." Kat stared at him for a long second, like she wasn't sure she heard right. Then her jaw tightened, the way people's jaws tighten when they're trying not to cry, and she turned to the group and waved them forward. One by one, the riders came inside, dripping, shivering, grateful. They filed past Solomon like survivors crossing a bridge. Some nodded, some whispered thank you. Some couldn't speak at all. The old man came last. He walked slowly, supported by the younger rider, a man named Philip Benson. When the old man passed Solomon in the doorway, he stopped, looked him in the eye, and said, very quietly, "Thank you." Solomon nodded. "You safe now?" The old man held Solomon's gaze a beat longer than expected. Then he moved inside. And Solomon, a man with 8 days left, 3 months behind, nothing in the bank and nothing to spare, closed the door behind them, shutting out the storm. But what Solomon didn't know was that the quiet old man he'd just welcomed into his shop was about to change everything. He just didn't know it yet. What Solomon did over the next 6 hours would have been remarkable for a team of 5 mechanics working in a fully equipped shop. He did it alone. And what he didn't know, what none of them knew yet, was that someone in that room was watching every single move he made. Not just watching, studying. But we'll get to that. The moment everyone was inside, Solomon shifted. It was like a switch flipped. The tired old man who'd been staring at an eviction notice all night disappeared. In his place stood someone sharper, faster. Someone whose hands remembered things his body had forgotten. Military training. It never really leaves you. He scanned the group the way a medic scans a field. 12 riders, 12 bikes. 2 machines down hard, one with a bent front fork, one with a blown electrical relay. 3 others needed minor work. Chain tension, brake adjustment, a tire going soft. The rest just needed drying and inspection. But bikes came second. People came first. Solomon walked straight to the older man, the quiet one with the calfskin gloves and the custom boots, the one Cat called Douglas. He was sitting on a crate near the wall, still shaking. His face had some color coming back, but not enough. Solomon pulled his old army blanket from the supply cabinet. Clean, folded tight. He draped it over Douglas's shoulders without asking. Then he went to the back, lit the kerosene heater, and put a kettle on. 5 minutes later, he came back with a cup of ginger tea. Hot, strong. The kind of thing Nora used to make when someone came in from the cold. "Drink this," Solomon said. "Whole cup, no arguing." Douglas looked up at him, took the cup in both hands, and for the first time that night, the old man almost smiled. "You always boss your customers around like this?" Solomon didn't blink. "Only the ones who show up half frozen at midnight." That's when Solomon noticed it. It was a small thing, easy to miss. As Douglas wrapped his hands around the cup, the light caught something on his right hand. A ring. Heavy. Platinum, not silver. And on its face, an engraved letter. A stylized W. Solomon's eyes lingered on it for half a second. Something about it felt familiar, like he'd seen that shape before. But the thought didn't land. Not yet. He had too much work to do. He shook it off and turned to the bikes. The first job was the bent fork on Douglas's motorcycle. A bent fork means the front wheel can't track straight. You can't ride it. You definitely can't ride it 200 miles to Memphis on a wet highway. Most shops would order a replacement and tell you to come back Thursday. Solomon didn't have that option. And he didn't have a replacement fork. What he had was a hydraulic press from 1994, a blowtorch, a mechanic's eye, and 40 years of figuring things out. He clamped the fork in the press, heated it slow and even, watched the metal for color changes the way a chef watches butter in a pan. Then, one precise push. Checked alignment. Another push. Checked again. 20 minutes later, the fork was straight. Not close to straight. Straight. The second bike, the blown relay, was a different problem. Solomon didn't have the right part in stock. He stood in front of his parts shelf for a long minute, thinking. Then he walked outside, into the rain, to his own truck. He popped the hood, pulled the relay from his own ignition system, walked back inside, and installed it in the dead bike. His truck wasn't going anywhere now. Kat was watching from across the shop. She hadn't taken her eyes off him since he walked out into that storm. "That relay, she said. "That's from your truck." Solomon didn't look up. "I'm not the one riding to Memphis." Kat opened her mouth to say something else, then closed it. Some things don't need words. While the bikes were drying, Solomon put on coffee, found canned soup in the back. 4 cans, enough for 12 if he stretched it. He heated it all, set out paper cups. The riders gathered around like it was Thanksgiving dinner. Nobody complained. They were grateful just to be warm. Some of them started looking around the shop, at the tool wall, the workbench, the Polaroids. One rider pointed at the wall and said, "You fix all these?" Solomon just nodded, kept working. But there was one person who wasn't just looking around. Douglas had gotten up from his crate. The blanket still hung around his shoulders, and he was moving through the shop with a strange kind of attention. Not casual, not curious, professional. He ran his fingers along a weld on an old chassis frame, paused, nodded slowly. He picked up a custom bracket Solomon had fabricated, a one-off piece made to hold a transmission mount that didn't exist in any catalog. Douglas turned it over in his hands, examined the joints, the grind marks, the symmetry. Then he asked quietly, "Where'd you learn to do metal work like this?" Solomon was under a bike, didn't look up. "Nowhere fancy. Just 40 years of figuring it out." Douglas set the bracket down gently, like it was worth something. Then he walked to the far wall and stopped. There it was. A yellowed magazine page pinned with a thumbtack. A photograph of a motorcycle. Sleek, black, chrome accents. The 2016 Ironside Heritage, limited edition. One of the most beautiful machines ever built. Douglas stared at that photo for a very long time. Then he turned and looked through the window at the bikes parked outside. One of those 12 bikes, his bike, was that exact model. A small smile crossed his face. Private. Quiet. Like he'd just confirmed something he suspected. He said nothing at all. Solomon didn't see the smile. He was already under the next bike. The hours ground on. Solomon moved from bike to bike. Midnight became 1 a.m. 1 became 3. 3 became 4. 4 bled into 5. Coffee pot emptied and refilled twice. Solomon's back screamed every time he bent under a frame. His hands cramped around wrenches. At one point, he dropped a socket and had to sit on the floor for a full minute before he could stand back up. But he stood, and he kept going. By 5:45 in the morning, all 12 motorcycles were road ready. Every chain tensioned, every brake checked, every tire inspected. Solomon wiped each one down with a clean rag before rolling it back outside into the dawn light. He straightened up from the last bike. His knees popped. His shoulders ached. His hands were shaking, but this time from exhaustion, not fear. Outside, the first gray light of dawn was creeping over the tree line. The storm had passed. The sky was finally clearing, and 12 machines sat in that muddy lot, lined up and ready to ride. He'd been on his feet for almost 19 hours straight. A man with nothing left to give, who gave it all anyway. Kat reached for her wallet. Solomon reached for the door. That's how the morning started. 2 people standing in the dawn light, wanting completely different things. The storm was gone. The sky was pink and gold. Steam rose off the wet gravel like the earth was breathing again. And 12 motorcycles sat in a row, gleaming, ready to ride. Kat pulled out a leather checkbook from inside her jacket. She held it up like a peace offering. "Name your price," she said. "Whatever it costs. You saved our ride. You saved our ceremony." Solomon shook his head, slow, steady. "I didn't do it for a price, ma'am." "Solomon." "No." The other riders started reaching into pockets, pulling out cash, 20s, 50s, holding bills out toward him like they were handing over tickets. Solomon stepped back, raised both hands. "No, ma'am. No, sir. Put your money away. You're veterans riding to honor a man who gave his life. I'm not taking $1 for that." Kat stared at him, then she lowered the checkbook. Her hand was trembling, but not from cold this time. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do all this?" Solomon was quiet for a moment. He looked at the row of bikes. 12 machines lined up like soldiers. Then he looked past them, at something only he could see. "My son Terry," he said. "He loved motorcycles, more than anything in this world. He was going to ride coast to coast one day. Had the whole route planned, maps on the wall, dates circled." Solomon paused, swallowed. "Terry got sick at 28. He never made that ride." Kat's eyes filled. "When I saw 12 riders pull up in the rain last night," Solomon said, "I didn't see strangers. I saw what Terry never got to do. And I thought, if my boy ever broke down somewhere in a storm, I'd want somebody to open a door for him." Kat didn't say anything. She just stepped forward and put her arms around him. Solomon stiffened at first, the way men do when they've gone too long without being held. Then something in his shoulders released. He let her hold on. It had been a long time since someone hugged Solomon Ingram. When she let go, Kat wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She nodded. No more arguing. She understood. The riders began mounting their bikes. Engines fired up one by one. The sound filled the morning like a heartbeat coming back to life. But one rider hadn't moved yet. Douglas. He stood by the shop door, waiting, patient, like he had one more thing to do before he left. When the others were busy with their helmets and straps, Douglas walked up to Solomon. He extended his hand, and Solomon took it. The handshake was long, firm, both hands. Douglas's grip was steady, and his eyes didn't waver. Then Douglas reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a business card. He held it face down, so Solomon couldn't read it, and pressed it into Solomon's palm. "Don't look at this until we're gone," Douglas said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "And Solomon, don't throw it away." Solomon frowned. "What is this?" Douglas just shook his head once. "You'll see." Then he turned, walked to his bike, the Ironside Heritage, and mounted it like a man who'd been riding his whole life. Kat saluted Solomon from her seat. The convoy pulled out, one by one, engines rumbling through the still morning air. Solomon stood in his lot and watched. He watched until the last taillight disappeared around the bend on Route 31. Then he was alone. The lot was empty. The air smelled like gasoline and wet earth and coffee. Solomon reached into his pocket and pulled out the business card, turned it over. His lips moved as he read it. His hand dropped to his side. He looked up at the road where the bikes had vanished, looked down at the card again, and he whispered, "No way." Solomon told himself it didn't mean anything, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He walked back inside the shop, stood under the fluorescent light, the one that buzzed and flickered like it was always about to give up. He held the business card under it and read the words again. Douglas R. Whitfield, Chairman, Whitfield Automotive Group. Below the printed text, a handwritten note in blue ink. Neat, deliberate. Your shop, your hands. We need to talk. I'll call. Solomon read it 3 times. Whitfield Automotive Group. He knew that name. Everyone in the automotive world knew that name. It was on the billboards along the highway, the same billboards Solomon drove past every single morning on his way to a shop he could barely keep open. Whitfield was one of the largest motorcycle and automotive parts distributors in the entire South. And Douglas Whitfield, the founder, the chairman, was the quiet old man Solomon had wrapped in an army blanket and handed ginger tea to 6 hours ago. The ring on Douglas's hand. The W. The same logo on those billboards. Solomon's knees went soft. He sat down on his rolling stool and just breathed. Then he looked at the wall. The yellowed magazine page. The Ironside Heritage. He reached up and unpinned it, flipped it over. There, in small print at the bottom of the page, commissioned by Whitfield Automotive Group. He pinned it back, sat down again, stared at the floor. The next morning, he told Earl. Earl laughed so hard he almost dropped his coffee. A billionaire? In your shop? Sol, you've been breathing too many fumes. Solomon laughed too, but he kept the card. He didn't call the number. Figured it was just politeness. Rich people say things in the moment. Gratitude fades. Life moves on. It didn't mean anything. Days passed. No call. Solomon went back to his routine. Wake up, coffee, unlock the stuck door. Wait for customers who didn't come. Lock the door. Go home. The eviction clock kept ticking. 8 days became 6. 6 became 4. He pinned a new Polaroid on the wall. A photo he'd taken of the dawn sky from the shop doorway the morning the riders left. Underneath it, in black marker, he wrote, "The night 12 showed up." It was the only new thing on that wall in 4 months. 4 days became 3. Solomon started making phone calls to shelters, to storage units, to Earl's wife about borrowing a truck, just in case. Then, on day 6 of waiting, the phone rang. Unknown number. Solomon almost didn't answer it. He picked it up. A woman's voice. Professional. Calm. "Mr. Ingram? Please hold for Mr. Whitfield." What Douglas Whitfield told Solomon in that phone call changed everything. But not in the way you'd expect. There was a click on the line. Then a voice. Warm, steady, and direct. The kind of voice that doesn't waste words because it's never had to. "Solomon, it's Douglas Whitfield. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Solomon almost laughed. A bad time. His shop was 3 days from closing. He was sitting on a crate next to a kerosene heater that was running on fumes. His truck still didn't have a relay. "No, sir," Solomon said. "Not a bad time at all." "Good, because I have something I need to say to you, and I want you to hear all of it before you respond." Solomon straightened up without thinking, like he was back in the army and a commanding officer just walked in. "I've been in the automotive business for 45 years, Douglas said. "I've visited factories in 9 countries. I've seen how the biggest shops in the world operate. Facilities with equipment worth millions. Engineers with degrees from schools you and I could never afford. He paused. And I want you to know, what you did in that shop, with those tools, in that storm, that was some of the finest mechanical work I have ever seen in my life. And I'm not saying that to be kind. I'm saying it because it's true. Solomon didn't speak. He couldn't. Douglas continued. That front fork, the way you straightened it. I've only seen that technique once before. A master fabricator in Stuttgart, Germany. A man with 30 years of training and a shop full of precision instruments. You did it with a hydraulic press from the 90s and a blowtorch. And you got it straighter than he did. Solomon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The relay, Douglas said. You pulled it from your own truck. Your own vehicle, Solomon. A man who can barely keep his lights on gave away a piece of his own transportation so 12 strangers could get to Memphis. That's not just skill. That's character. And that bracket on your wall, the custom transmission mount. I picked it up that night, turned it over in my hands. The weld joints were precise. The symmetry was perfect. Most certified shops with brand new welding rigs can't produce work like that. You did it by hand, alone, with tools older than half my employees. Douglas paused again. When he spoke next, his voice had changed, softer, more personal. You're not just a mechanic, Solomon. You're an engineer who never got the title. Solomon closed his eyes. He pressed the phone against his ear so hard the plastic creaked. 40 years. 40 years of working alone in a shop that nobody noticed, in a town that was disappearing, with tools that other mechanics would throw away. And this man, this stranger he'd served ginger tea to in a storm, had seen all of it. Not just seen it, understood it. Mr. Whitfield, Solomon said. His voice was rough. I appreciate that more than you know. But I just did what needed doing. That's exactly my point, Douglas said. And that's exactly why I'm calling. Solomon held his breath. Here it comes. I didn't call to say thank you, Solomon. I called because Whitfield Automotive is launching a new initiative. A national network of independent repair shops, specializing in motorcycle restoration and veteran-owned vehicle service. We're investing $25 million into the first wave of partner shops across the South. Solomon's grip tightened on the phone. His mouth went dry. And I want Ingram's Auto and Cycle to be our flagship location. The room went silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where the air itself stops moving. Solomon couldn't speak. Everything. Every year of struggle, every night he almost gave up, every time someone told him to close the shop, every Polaroid on that wall. It all crashed into this single moment like a wave hitting a seawall. Mr. Whitfield, Solomon said. His voice cracked on the second word. I appreciate this more than you will ever know, but I have to be honest with you. He swallowed hard. I'm about to lose this shop. I'm 3 months behind on rent. I've got days, not weeks, days. I don't even know if I'll have a building for you to invest in. There was a pause on the other end, a long one. Then Douglas spoke, and what he said, Solomon would remember for the rest of his life. Solomon, I didn't call to invest in a building. I called to invest in you. The building is the easy part. Another pause. Now, I'm going to be in Beaumont in 3 weeks. I'd like to see the shop in person. Can you hold on for 3 weeks? Solomon looked around the shop, at the stuck door, at the leaking roof, at Nora's reading glasses on the hook, at the Polaroid wall. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of machines, 30 years of proof that his hands had mattered. "I've held on for 40 years, Solomon said. "I can do 3 more weeks." After the call ended, Solomon sat in his shop for a long time. He didn't move. He didn't call Earl. He didn't make coffee. He just sat there. He looked at Nora's reading glasses. The light from the window caught the lenses and made them glow. He looked at the Polaroid wall. All those faces. All those cars. He looked down at his own hands. Scarred. Cracked. Stained with decades of grease and work and love. And for the first time in years, Solomon Ingram cried. Not sad tears, not relief, not even joy. Something deeper than all of it. Something that doesn't have a name. The feeling of being seen. 3 weeks later, Solomon heard engines again. But this time, the sun was shining. He'd spent every one of those 21 days getting ready. Not because anyone told him to, because for the first time in years, he had something to get ready for. He scrubbed the shop floor on his hands and knees, cleaned the windows, both of them, with vinegar and newspaper the way Nora used to. Organized every tool on the pegboard by size. Oiled the stuck bay door until it opened without kicking. It still groaned, but it opened. Earl came over and helped him repaint the sign out front. Navy blue on white. Same colors Nora picked in 1992. Earl even painted the missing R back on. "You're acting like the president's coming," Earl said, up on a ladder with a brush. "Somebody's coming," Solomon said. "That's enough." On the morning of the visit, Solomon put on his cleanest work shirt, ironed it himself. He stood in front of Nora's reading glasses and said something quiet. Then he walked outside and waited. At 9:15, he heard them. Not 12 motorcycles this time. 3 black SUVs, a flatbed truck, and behind them, one single motorcycle. A black Ironside Heritage, chrome catching the Texas sun like a mirror. Douglas Whitfield, riding in himself. Beside him in the convoy, Cat Eldridge, Philip Benson, and 4 other riders from that night. They'd come back. Douglas dismounted from the Heritage and walked straight to Solomon. He didn't shake his hand first. He hugged him. Brief, firm, the kind of hug that says more than a handshake ever could. Then he stepped back, looked at the freshly painted sign, and nodded. "Show me everything," Douglas said. Solomon did. They walked the shop together. Douglas, an architect, a contractor, and a woman Douglas introduced as his wife, Connie Whitfield. Connie had been an interior designer before she started running the Whitfield Foundation's community programs. She carried a notebook and wrote in it constantly. Douglas didn't rush. He touched things. He ran his hand along the hydraulic press Solomon had used that night, pressed his palm flat against it, like he was shaking hands with the machine itself. He pointed things out to the architect. "This stays," he said about the press. "This has history." "This, too," he said about the Polaroid wall. "Don't touch a single photo." Connie looked at the Polaroid wall for a long time. Then she turned to Solomon and said, quietly, "This is the most honest thing I've ever seen in a shop." They ended up in Solomon's tiny office. A desk, a chair, Nora's glasses on the hook. The Polaroid of the dawn sky pinned above the desk. Douglas sat down across from Solomon like they were old friends having coffee. Then he laid it out. Whitfield Automotive would fund a complete renovation of Ingram's Auto and Cycle. New equipment, 3 full bays instead of 2. Modernized diagnostics installed alongside Solomon's original hand tools, because Douglas insisted the old tools stay. Total investment, $850,000. Solomon would become the owner-operator and lead training director of the flagship location for the Whitfield Veteran Trades Initiative. His title, his shop, his name on the building. But it went further. Solomon would receive a salaried position as a master technician consultant. That meant travel. Other shops in the network, across Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, would bring him in to train young mechanics. His self-taught techniques, the ones he'd figured out alone over 40 years, would become official curriculum. Written down, passed on, preserved. And then Douglas said the last part. His voice dropped lower, more careful. We're establishing a trade education scholarship fund for veterans and their families, and I'd like to name it after your son. Solomon's breath stopped. The Terrence Terry Ingram Scholarship. Initial endowment, $200,000. Awarded annually to young people pursuing careers in skilled trades. Solomon stood up. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He didn't say, "Hold on." He just stood and walked to the window, put his hand flat against the glass. His shoulders shook. Earl, standing outside the office door where he'd been listening the whole time, quietly took off his glasses and looked away. After a long moment, Solomon turned back around. His eyes were red. His voice was barely holding together. "You're putting my boy's name on something that helps people." "Yes," Douglas said, "because your boy's name deserves to be remembered." Then Douglas told Solomon something he hadn't shared publicly. Something personal. Something that explained everything. "My father was a mechanic," Douglas said. "A black man in rural Alabama in the 1960s. He could fix anything. Cars, tractors, generators. People drove 50 miles to bring him their machines. He was brilliant, and he never got a single opportunity that matched his talent. Not one. He died in that same little shop he opened at 25. Still waiting." Douglas leaned forward. "When I walked into your shop that night, Solomon, I saw my father, standing in a shop that the world forgot, doing extraordinary work that nobody noticed. And I made myself a promise. I am not going to let the same thing happen twice." The room was quiet. Solomon looked at Douglas. Douglas looked at Solomon. Two old men who understood exactly what it costs to build something with your hands and have the world try to take it away. Solomon extended his hand. Douglas took it. Not a business handshake. Both hands, eye to eye. The kind of grip that means something that paper can't hold. Outside, Kat Eldridge watched through the window. She didn't hear the words. She didn't need to. She could see it on their faces. Something important had just changed. Not just for Solomon. For everyone his hands would touch from this day forward. But the story didn't end with Solomon. It was just beginning. What happened next didn't just change one shop. It changed a whole town. The renovation started 2 weeks later. A crew arrived from Houston with equipment Solomon had only ever seen in catalogs. For 4 months, Ingram's Auto and Cycle was torn down to the studs and built back up. New concrete floor, smooth, level, no more cracks to trip over. 3 full bays instead of 2, each with a hydraulic lift that actually worked. a digital diagnostic station that could read codes Solomon used to guess at by ear. And right beside it, bolted to the original workbench, every single one of Solomon's hand tools. The same wrenches, the same socket set, the same blowtorch he'd used to straighten Douglas's fork that night. Douglas had been clear. The old tools stay. The history stays. You build the future on top of the past, not instead of it. On the exterior wall, a local artist from Beaumont painted a mural. Two hands, Solomon's hands, holding a wrench, with the silhouettes of 12 motorcycles riding into a sunrise behind them. When Solomon first saw the finished mural, he stood in front of it for 10 minutes without speaking. Then he said, "Nora would have liked this." The grand reopening made the news. The Beaumont Gazette ran it on the front page. From near eviction to national flagship. The story got picked up by regional outlets, then national. A clip went viral, Solomon standing in front of the new shop with Earl beside him. Solomon looked around at the gleaming bays, the fresh paint, the mural, and said, "Nora would have loved this. She always said the place needed a woman's touch." Earl, without missing a beat, "She'd say it still needs one, Sol." Both of them laughing like old times. Then came the ripple effects. Solomon hired 3 young mechanics from the Beaumont area. 2 of them were veterans who hadn't been able to find steady work since coming home. The third was a 22-year-old who dropped out of trade school because he couldn't afford it. Solomon trained all 3 personally. Hands-on, no shortcuts. The way he'd learned, and the way he'd taught Terry. Earl Gentry's barbershop saw a surge in business almost overnight. More foot traffic, more customers, more conversations. A reporter asked Earl what he thought of the whole thing. Earl grinned and said, "I told that man to retire. Thank God he doesn't listen to me." The Terry Ingram Scholarship awarded its first 3 grants to young veterans in East Texas pursuing trade certifications. The ceremony was small, held in the shop, folding chairs, coffee in paper cups. Solomon presented the certificates himself. He read each name out loud. His voice was steady. His hands didn't shake. When he finished, he looked at the Polaroid wall, now longer, filling with new faces, and nodded once, like he was telling Terry something. Cat Eldridge's memorial ride officially added Ingram's Auto and Cycle as an annual stop. Every year, the 12 riders would return. Same route, same purpose. But now, when they pulled into that gravel lot on Route 31, there was a clean shop, fresh coffee, and Solomon standing in the doorway waiting for them. It became a tradition, a gathering point for veterans and riders from across the state. And Hank Caldwell showed up at the reopening. He stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. When the crowd thinned, he walked up to Solomon and shook his hand. "I'm glad it worked out, Sol," he said. Awkward, stiff. Solomon just nodded. "Appreciate you giving me the time, Hank." He hadn't given him the time. They both knew that. But Solomon was gracious. He always had been. Within 6 months, Solomon was traveling. Houston, New Orleans, Jackson, Biloxi, training young mechanics at partner shops across the network. He brought his 40-year notebook, handwritten diagrams, grease-stained pages, notes in the margins. Whitfield had the whole thing scanned and turned into official training materials. Then came the magazine. A national automotive publication ran a profile on the Whitfield Veteran Trades Initiative. Solomon was on the cover. The photograph showed him standing in his shop, arms folded, next to two framed items on the wall: the yellowed Ironside Heritage magazine clipping, and a new photo of Douglas and Solomon shaking hands the day the renovation was complete. Side by side, past and present, on the same wall. And then, one night, it rained again. 11 months later, another storm rolled through Beaumont, thunder shaking the walls, water hammering the new roof, the one that didn't leak anymore. It was late. Solomon was closing up. The shop looked different now, but some things hadn't changed. Nora's glasses still hung by the register. The Polaroid wall still stretched across the back. And Solomon still closed up alone, the same way he had for 30 years. He was reaching for the light switch when he heard a knock. He opened the door. A young woman stood in the rain, mid-20s, soaked through. Behind her, a sedan with its hood up, engine silent. "My car just died," she said. "I'm driving to Dallas for a job interview tomorrow morning. My first one in a long time. I don't know what to do." Solomon looked at her, drenched, scared, asking a stranger for help. He didn't hesitate, not for a second. He stepped aside. "Come on in, let's get out of this rain." He fixed the alternator in under an hour, made her coffee while she waited. She sat in the shop and looked around, at the mural, the Polaroids, the tools. She didn't know the story behind any of it. She just knew that a man she'd never met was fixing her car at 11 o'clock at night and wouldn't let her leave without a warm cup in her hands. When the car was running again, she reached for her purse. Solomon shook his head. "Why?" she asked. "Why won't you let me pay?" Solomon glanced at the wall behind the register. Two things hung there, side by side. Nora's reading glasses, right where they'd always been, and next to them, in a small frame, a business card. Douglas Whitfield's card. The one that had been pressed into his palm on a morning that smelled like gasoline and rain. Solomon looked at the young woman and said, "Somebody opened a door for me once when I couldn't see the way forward. I'm just keeping it going." She drove away into the slowly clearing night. Solomon watched the taillights disappear down Route 31, the same way he'd watched 12 motorcycles vanish almost a year ago. Same lot, same man, same open door. He turned off the light, walked to the doorway. Outside, the rain was finally easing. The mural glowed under the street lamp, his hands, the wrench, the 12 silhouettes. And on the Polaroid wall inside, the newest photo. Solomon standing with 3 young graduates, each holding a certificate that read, "Terrence Terry Ingram Scholarship." He locked the door quietly. Same kick, same pull. Some things don't change, and some things shouldn't. So why did I want to tell you this story? Because in a world full of noise, Solomon Ingram did something quiet. He didn't post about it, didn't film it, didn't ask for credit. He opened a door at midnight for 12 strangers while an eviction notice sat in his pocket. Gave away parts from his own truck, fed them, fixed their bikes all night. When they offered him money, he said no. He didn't know who Douglas Whitfield was, didn't know what was coming. He helped because helping is who he is. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. When did a stranger last show you kindness you didn't expect? Hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. And next time it rains, look for the open door.
This is the one I want to end on. The people who give the most are almost never the people who have the most. They are the ones running on empty, tired, broke, barely holding on, who still open the door for someone else. That's not generosity from comfort. That's a generosity from sacrifice. And there's nothing more powerful than that. And here's what most people miss. What you build with your hands doesn't disappear just because the world stops paying attention. 40 years of showing up, 40 years of doing the work when nobody noticed. That's not wasted time. That's the foundation. And the right person walks in, sees what's really there, and everything changes. But the part that stays with me, he didn't know who were watching, didn't have because someone important was in the room. He had because that's who he is. Rain or shine, full pockets or empty. That's the difference between people who perform kindness and people who live it. One needs an audience, the other just needs a door to open. So tell me, when did a stranger last show you kindness you didn't expect? Drop it in the comments. If this one hit you, share it, like it, subscribe so you are here for the next one. And the next time it rains, look for the open door.